where the water of life meets the tree of life. Although this month we're going to do something a little bit different. Since October 7th, I've not been able to get a podcast episode out. I have a number of interviews banked, and I will be bringing those to you in the new year. Part of the reason why I've not been able to get something out is that my time as a congregational rabbi has really been filled with regular duties, plus needing to tend to the needs of the congregation and provide some extra when it came to keeping up to date with what was going on in Israel and providing support for our members, dealing with all of the things that have manifested for the Jewish community in America since then. I also felt that it was important to bring some of the reflections and conversations into the podcast space here to make this one of our drushes, to talk about what's been going on in Israel. I'm very clear for myself as a congregational rabbi. I am not a military strategist or a foreign relations expert. And so my role is much more of a pastoral one, trying to hold us up during these difficult times. But I do think it's important that we have conversations where we can learn about what people are experiencing from a range of perspectives. One of the things that I think a lot of us have struggled with is that the way in which the ongoing war is being reported in the media is one in which the ongoing impact of October 7th on the citizens of Israel doesn't often make it to the front of the news story. Rockets continue to fire on Israel on a daily basis. They're coming from multiple directions because Hezbollah on the northern border has chosen to get involved. There have been hundreds of thousands of Israelis who have had to leave their homes away from border areas and are temporarily housed in other parts of the country with their lives upended. And of course, those who were attacked directly on October 7th are dealing with all of the ramifications of what was a horrific terror attack. So I wanted people to have an opportunity to hear a little bit about the daily life of Israelis and what the feeling is within Israel about what has been experienced and is being experienced. And that is why I turned to my guests today. These are members of my family, but much more than that. Shlomo and Sharona Maital are my sister-in-law and my brother-in-law. Shlomo is a professor emeritus from the Technion. He is senior research fellow at the Nieman Institute. For many years, he was the academic director of the Technion Institute of Management, which meant that he got to interface with hundreds of high-tech companies and their managers. For many summers, he came over to MIT here in the Boston area to teach as well. And he writes regularly a column for the Jerusalem Report, which is a magazine that's available to us, in addition to the ongoing research publications that he continues to work on. Sharona Maital, Dr. Sharona Maital, is an educational psychologist. She worked for many years as an educational psychologist, actually as the senior regional school psychologist at the Ministry of Education in the Haifa area. She continues now in semi-retirement to teach and to research and to publish in her field of educational psychology. But since October 7th, she's stepped back into the field more actively, providing psychological services and support to those who have been displaced from their homes near the Gaza border and near the Lebanon border, and has that experience to draw upon. So I'm really honored. It's wonderful that I can bring their perspectives to you and share that with you. This month, we'll start with the Drash. We'll end with a little L'chaim. This was recorded today, Friday, the 22nd of December. And so we finished recording just a short while before they were going to enter into Shabbat. So it felt appropriate. that we would end with a l'chaim. And so I introduce to you Shlomo and Sharona Maital. Shlomo and Sharona, it's wonderful to have you on my podcast. I think this is the first time officially that I have Mishpacha on the podcast. You're joining me from Israel. It's almost Shabbat at that end, early in the morning here. It's really a wonderful opportunity to both catch up with you and to have an opportunity for listeners to the podcast to hear a little bit about some of the experiences that you have been having, the things you have been doing and pondering, particularly since the events of October 7th.
We love you a lot, and we're very fond of your congregation, Beth Shalom, and we're fans of Jewish Renewal.
Yeah, and and it's very important to us to speak to audiences abroad and tell them what's going on here and have people gain a better understanding, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of information that doesn't get out.
Absolutely. I think so, that we are aware. We had hosted an event just a couple of weeks ago at the synagogue, which was an opportunity to bring Israelis in who are running a place for people to go to recover from trauma through holistic healing and yoga and being in a natural space for a number of days with full holistic healing and group psychologists and so on, and to really understand more fully what actually happened on October 7th and the impact of that can help people understand the dilemma that Israel has found itself in and the difficult job that it is trying to do. So let's start there. Sharona, I know that your work has been with some of the people who were most directly impacted, the ones who were right there at the border when Hamas came through on October 7th. Can you tell people a little bit about the work that you do, your professional work, and the communities that you've been working with since that time?
Yeah, I mean, I have actually, except for a few days immediately after when I saw one of the families, an extended family with a number of kids, and I saw the kids who had been through the actual, I will call it the massacre at Be'eri, at one of the kibbutzim. Most of what I've been doing is with people who are evacuated to the hotels. There are how many evacuated, Shlomo? Oh, well over
North and south, 130,000.
130,000 people who are not living in their homes but are living in hotels. Zichron Yaakov, where we live, which in some ways is a bubble because we're in the middle, so we're a very safe area within the country. Things have not been experienced directly in that sense. We have two fairly large hotels here that are occupied by residents. And the one I've been working with has people mostly from the north. The nature of the work has changed over time, actually, and people have moved around so that communities have moved to be together. Most of the people who are directly affected are in the hotels in the south, in En-Gedi, in the Dead Sea area, and in Eilat, and they have stayed together as communities, which is a very important part of their recovery, actually. I'm in touch with and have just edited a journal issue with reports by psychologists who've been working all over the country. And so there are the reports there of the people who were actually down there. One of our psychologists was actually evacuated from one of the kibbutzim, and miraculously, having been evacuated, she went from immediately helped set up the mental health services at the hotel where she's been living since. It's an interesting transformation. Initially, there was a tremendous outpouring of volunteer help and a lot of immediate acute stress response work that we did. With the children, I saw as well. I mean, I saw them only a few times because then they they left the northern area where they had gone to be with friends, and they left to be with the rest of their kibbutz community. But a couple of things that are striking, and one of them is that alongside the tremendous trauma and grief, there's tremendous resilience, certainly among the children that I've seen. They keep playing, and they keep, they're looking at the good things in their day-to-day life and adapting. And I think it's a really important it's a really important source of hope. It doesn't mean, one of the things that we are very clear on today is that, people sometimes, when you're in mourning or when you're really depressed and have experienced trauma, people will say, get over it. And actually what happens is it's not so much that you get over it, you learn to live with both together, with the good moments and with the sad and difficult moments. And you learn to let them coexist and not be focused totally on. You probably heard this from the people that came to your congregation as well, I assume. And as time has gone on in the last week or two, we really see it. There's a very strong attempt to make life, even in a hotel setting, as much like daily living as possible, as normal daily living, I should say, so that they now have banks of washing machines that they put in a laundromat style. Nobody's doing laundry for them, even though in the beginning there were tons of volunteers who were doing their laundry and bringing them clothes and all kinds of things like that. And now people are saying, wait a minute, you can go to the store just as you would if you were in Kiryat Shmona. Most of the people here are from the north, actually. And you can do these things for yourself, because they were realizing what was happening is people were doing everything for them. And they needed to start doing things in a routine way. The kids are now all integrated into the local schools. So they get on a school bus in the morning and they all go out to school. They're not in the hotel lobby. They're not being entertained and doing all these kinds of things.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense now that we're a couple of months in. And as you said, it's also part of the healing from trauma is trying to find your way back to some kind of normality in terms of the rhythm of life. And I can understand psychologically the need for people who were less directly impacted, who were like, what can I do? That was felt very strongly, certainly prior to the fundraising event that we held at our congregation. I had some congregants who were listening and watching and trying to stay up, but felt, other than, sending donations, that there was this sense of powerlessness of what can we do?
Yeah.
And I think we saw that outpouring. Some of that was, at least it seemed to be, responding to a lack of that kind of leadership coming from the government.
So let me read a short passage from a friend of mine, Dr. Kim Traeger. She's a PhD in jurisprudence from Oxford and writes a blog in the Times of Israel. And this, I think, captures it. It's just about 100 words. She writes that the whole country's in shell shock, suffering a form of post-trauma stress disorder. We are all in it together. That response shows collective agency. The government has failed to take action. That's an understatement of the year. It has pretty much fallen apart, and the government has destroyed the civil service. But the civil society, that's us, the civil society has been incredible. People grapple with so many needs, civilians and soldiers. Many of the organizers of the protest movement, just a year ago, we were out in the streets protesting, and you have T-shirts that joined us. Many of the protest movement people have geared their efforts extraordinarily fast to the current crisis. They transported soldiers to the south on the first day of the attack, even while the army couldn't yet get together. We had 330,000 soldiers, reserve soldiers, drafted in just a matter of hours. And as one said, we know how to organize. The successful efforts at organizing civil life are outstanding. People host families of evacuees from north and south, donate supplies, and arrange everything for them. People who come together, you can see it in their eyes. In walking down the street, when that's possible, the way people look into each other's eyes is different from the way it is at other times. There's a depth of understanding of how other people feel. Is this unity? Yes. Solidarity? Yes. And collective agency. It is the chosen. Chosen is resilience in Hebrew that Israelis have. It is our power. And I might mention a survey, a public opinion poll that was taken on December 3rd of all Israelis, the whole population. And the question is, has there been a change in your feeling of solidarity in Israel's society since the start of the war? And 82% say a big change or a change in becoming more, having more togetherness at a time when, I mean, we were virtually at a non-military civil war a year ago, and it's a terrible shame that it took this to bring us together again as people.
I would add that Reuven Gal, who's an expert on crisis intervention and particularly net resilience at the community level, he and some of the others, I don't remember exactly who did all the writing, talk about the fact that the mobilization of civil society is often the first mobilization, not just because the government was not working well. And that's really a very strong indicator of resilience, the ability of people. Now, one of the parts of it is that what the whole society in some ways was traumatized. I'd be careful talking about post-traumatic stress, because post means that the stress is, we're at least 2 months beyond what happened, and it's still ongoing. We're in an acute traumatic stress situation. And I think one of the things people do, one of the things that helps people remain resilient, is to be actively involved in doing things. So a lot of the outpouring of volunteering and doing things, and also the feelings of your congregants that I've got to do something. It's one of our most natural ways of maintaining our sanity, our ability to cope when we're faced with difficult situations.
Yeah, no, I certainly saw that at a much different scale, when the world sort of shut down with the beginning of the pandemic, and saw how quickly and how many members of our community stepped forward to create teams of people who were going to phone and check in on others and, take care of groceries for people who, were immunocompromised, and all of those things that happened because it was a way to do something when there was very little you could do other than stay home. But that's, at a very different scale to what Israel has been going through. I think that is something that, in terms of what we hear in the news, and clearly, there's no question that suffering of human beings, of civilians who are not terrorists in Gaza, the images that most of us are seeing on the news are devastating, and no normal human being would not feel compassion and a lot of feeling for what is being experienced there at this time. But I think what they often don't realize is how many communities in Israel are still ducking for cover when the alarms go off multiple times every single day. The rockets haven't stopped, and they're coming from multiple directions. So I know you said that where you are in the middle of the country, you're a little bit more insulated in terms of being a little bit more out of the range of where some of that's coming from. But can you describe that, what that is like for the country as a whole. As you said, it's not that this happened 2 months ago and now everything's happening in Gaza. It's continuing to be present in the fabric of daily life in Israel too. Yes.
So yesterday, Rachel, we had a barrage of 30 rockets aimed directly at Tel Aviv and the surrounding area. We have this amazing Iron Dome system that intercepts most of them. Sometimes the fragments fall and cause serious damage. And we are occupying Gaza now with our army, and they are still able to fire 30 rockets at us in a barrage. And it's done by high tech. They have elevators. The rockets are loaded, mounted, and then they press a button. They rise to the ground level, fire them automatically from a distance. Nobody's nearby with cell phones. And then the platform is lowered into the ground. And we've been scouring the ground trying to find these things. So Tel Aviv is a target, and our settlements in the north, all of the area around the north and beyond the north as well, inside the Galil, they've also been targets of the Hezbollah, who are joining in solidarity with their friends Hamas. And we are basically fighting the war in the south and holding off our power in the north so that we can focus on the south. At some point, we will have to deal with the bad guys in the north as well. And we have the West Bank, which has been restive, to say the least. And our friends, the Houthis, who are in Yemen, 1,500 miles away, who figure they want to join the party as well and have stopped shipping in a crucial part of the world. This is not just our little war. This is much bigger than that.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
And I want to just reflect on the experience of, you said, the enormous call up of reserves. So, this is, when we talk about reserves, people think, in the United States, we have an army, right? It's very different. In Israel, everyone serves. You're talking about people who have been in college, young people who did their mandatory service before going to college and who are now in their 20s, some of them in their 30s, and who are called back to serve their country, who were living their lives, their civilian life until that moment. So this is impacting every single family. Can you give us a sense of what that is looking like and feels like?
Well, I can tell you that our grandson Aaron, who is in the tank corps, he's in an advanced reconnaissance unit?
Commando reconnaissance unit attached to the armored corps, the tank corps.
Armored corps. And he's gotten home maybe 2 or 3 times since the beginning of the war. Actually, what was it, 2 weeks ago was the first time he got home for a full Shabbat. And I quickly ran down to Tamara's to my daughters so that I could get to see him. And actually this Shabbat, he's out again for like 48 hours. Our granddaughters, I have 2 granddaughters whose husbands are also in the army, and one just finished for now until they call him back, who's in the engineering corps. Our son Noam, he actually volunteered. He went back into the army as a reservist, and he was there for over a month. He's out now, but he already notified me that he'll be back in Miluim a couple times in the coming year. So yeah, I hardly know anyone who doesn't have a kid or a grandkid in the army. Some of them are in intelligence units serving outside Gaza. Some of them are in Gaza. Some of them are in the north. And it's scary. On the other hand, we're also proud of them and supportive. Our shul did a huge thing Hanukkah time to send them big packages and everything else.
I want to add something really important. During the protest movement for almost a year, many reservists, pilots, senior officers, commandos indicated they would refuse to serve this government, that they could not serve a government that was anti-democratic. And we had this huge protest movement. When the war broke out, that disappeared. completely disappeared. Everybody showed up. Reserves had 110% call up. Some of the older guys were not called up because there were just too many. We have returned to having everybody show up to defend their country when it's in trouble.
There's
Right,
tremendous sense of commitment and a tremendous sense that we're fighting for our survival. We really are, because we're fighting an enemy that does not want us to exist. You know, I wish, everybody talks about making agreements with them and reconcile with them, but how do you reconcile with somebody who absolutely doesn't want you to exist?
There's the parsha this week is Vayigash, and Vayigash has several meanings. Yehuda approaches Vayigash, Joseph, his brother. He approaches him to confront him. Got to get his Benjamin, his little brother, out of there. He comes to confer, to conciliate. Vayigash has all of these meanings, and we face all those meanings now. We're confronting an enemy. At some point, we need to confer, conciliate. We need to bargain over our hostages, and it's very difficult and very complex with an implacable enemy who's sworn to wipe us out.
right, right. So I want to just ask a question, because there is that sense in which you've said through the unity, and the protests that were before this, and a lot of that was put aside to do what needs to be done in this moment. And yet, I know Israel and Israelis. They are not going to be all of one opinion on anything. And that's certainly true amongst the Jews here as well. We are seeing those whose families, members are still held hostage. There's been an enormous sense from them that the government has not prioritized the hostages. There are some, I'm sure, within Israel who are asking questions about strategy. And strategy is a different thing to the bigger picture, which I think you've painted for us. And strategy, I have to say, is something that as a rabbi, I tend to steer clear of. That's not what my sermons have been about, because, these are very complicated issues. You said, the Houthis are involved. There's international, foreign diplomatic layers to this. And there's also what strategy actually gets you to a place where Israelis can live with a sense of security, people can go back to their homes at the borders, and that the people of Gaza actually have half a chance of a future that they would want to have. What are some of the dynamics that you're aware of, or the things that, are people largely in moving in one direction on those things, or is there a lot of debate about that within Israel too?
All right. So let me try to present the dilemma in a Jewish fashion as a question. So we're fighting an implacable enemy, and we really do want to prioritize and get our hostages back. And we're willing to pay a heavy price. We have a lot of bad guys in our jail, and we're happy to get rid of them. So we had a hostage exchange that brought a significant number of hostages, 80 or more, back to us. And it was done because the Hamas were squeezed. They didn't have fuel for their air conditioning. They didn't have food. They didn't have water. And they were desperate, and they went for the deal. Now we have pressure from America, and America has been an incredible ally and supporter. And the pressure is not to starve or persecute the population in Gaza. So trucks, 200, 300 trucks are coming in daily, lots of fuel. And all of that pressure is off the Hamas. And suddenly they're announcing yesterday, no more negotiations over the prisoners. You got to withdraw, stop the fighting, and maybe we'll think about continuing negotiations. So here we are. We kind of have to fight with one hand tied behind our back. And it's understandable, and we can do it because the other hand is really strong. But it's very complex and difficult for the army and for the political leadership. And to be honest, the political leadership doesn't always agree or get along with what the army wants and needs to do. And I have to say this, we're generally upbeat, and people are, but let me give you another piece of information from a poll just to show how complex this situation is. So in wartime, it's very crucial that you have strong leadership. The British had Churchill. Imagine if they had Chamberlain in World War II rather than Churchill. So this poll on December the 10th asked people, what is the trust in Israeli institutions? Do you trust the army? 91% people trust the army, always have. Police, 58%. We have a minister in charge of the police who is a crackpot far-right guy. Do you trust the government? Do you trust the government? 23%, Rachel. Less than a quarter of the population. Half the population voted for this damn government on November 4th, 2022. So they've lost their own supporters, what's called their base. Not just us, but their base as well. We have a desperate war that we're fighting, and people do not trust the government, and with good reason.
Yeah.
So I know that forecasting is almost impossible because there's so many unknowns here. But do you think that actually when this stage of the battle, the war, feels like it's gotten beyond, that we're looking fairly confidently at the citizens of Israel looking for a change in government?
That's certainly true, and there's a strong suspicion that our leader, the prime minister, has a deep interest in continuing the hostilities, because when they end, there will be a protest movement like you've never seen to get rid of him. It happened in 1973, and it will certainly happen again. And it's a terrible feeling that the leader of our country does not seem to have a strong interest in settling this mess. The intensity of the fighting will decrease. We'll change our methods toward more smaller strikes. There will be negotiations that will be long, prolonged over the hostages. American support has been unbelievable. This is going to go on, and we have a threat in the north that has to be dealt with. The settlements in Kiryat Shmona is a city. The people have been evacuated. It's abandoned. It's a ghost town. Our people have to return. We need to live in our country, on the borders, inside the country, and that can only be done when we remove the current threats. So this is going to continue for some time.
I think also one of the things that's I think is important for people to understand, we think of the threats in terms of conventional warfare and things of that sort, and they talk about all of the violations of humanitarian rights. And I was just listening to a piece by, I think it was Naftali Bennett who talked about it on Hard Talk. And everybody talks about, violations of human rights by going into hospitals and things like that. But if you look at the law, even when a hospital is actually a military base and not a hospital, when the head of a hospital is a Hamas fighter, and we now know that, what are we supposed to do? And how do we explain to the world that the hospitals and the schools are not hospitals and schools? It's a part of the trauma is that our whole world view, our whole way of looking at things that we have has changed. It's been shattered. And we don't quite yet, I think, have a new narrative or a new perception of things. But our rabbi here in our shul in Zichron is always reminding us that the word for a crisis and trauma-related things is mashber in Hebrew. And the mashber, which is a terrible crisis, is also the birthing stone in biblical Hebrew. It's both the shattering of what was and the place where something new comes out of that. And I think we're still waiting to see what's going to come out of it.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I wonder about, and I don't know if you have any sense of it, is that, on the one hand, the protests came about last year, this being one of the most sort of extreme right-wing governments that Israel has seen. And I know right and left get defined a little differently in Israel than what Americans are used to those
Mhm.
labels meaning. But because Hamas has shown its true face, like so incredibly, extremely, with what happened and their determination to keep doing this, such that Israel feels that there is no choice other than to remove them from the playing field. The question I have is whether coming out of this, were there to be another round of elections, whether there will be an opening to something that says, you know, we need to try another way. We need to open up to see if we can negotiate with the Palestinian Authority, or whether, in fact, more Israelis will there'll be almost a hardening of, look, this is what we're dealing with. The only priority we have is to, build up the walls and the fences and the defenses so that we are protected from this happening again. And I'm wondering or worrying whether there may be more of a movement to the right because of what Israel has been through.
No, we constantly have polls taken. Who would you vote for if we had elections? And if we had elections, the right would be wiped out.
The extreme right.
The extreme right, but even the non-extreme right, the religious Zionists led by Smotrich, in some of the polls, they don't even pass the 3.5% threshold for entering the Knesset. That means they don't even get four members of the Knesset. Many of the rabbis, and we understand this from some of our own family, many of the rabbis understand now the terrible damage that the far right has done, and not only the far right, but the religious right. And if we had elections tomorrow, we would have a center-left government with a coalition, but with a strong majority.
I'm not sure if it would be center left or center right. It would be more center. And at the same time, I think there's a strong ethos or feeling that just as there was no reconciliation with Nazis in Germany, it's not clear that there can be a reconciliation with the Hamas. That we want something else to be able to take hold in the Palestinian society and Muslim society, yes, but unfortunately, so much of their ideology is very, very anti-Jewish.
Yeah,
There
no
is
question.
There is hope, Rachel. The Saudis and the Qataris, as you know, they have big bucks. It's an irony that the good Lord has given them the oil and the gas, but that's life. And the Qataris have pumped billions into Gaza, and it went underground into these damn tunnels rather than helping the people. They're not stupid. These are sophisticated people, the Saudis and the Qataris, and they're not going to do that again. Gaza has to be rebuilt. It's a wreckage. It will not be rebuilt again just so that we have to level it. That will not happen again. The Qataris won't agree to that. So it's not just us. The Arabs themselves, the ones with the money, and the ones with the money, the person with the money has the say. They will, with us, try to see that some sanity exists in Gaza so that it's run properly for the people and not for the crackpots.
So it's as you said, out of the devastation, the birthing of perhaps some hope and some possibilities, but only once one emerges from the darkness, which is still very much where we are while this battle needs to be fought, possibly on a second front. If things don't calm down, I think from what I've gathered, Hezbollah has access to more powerful military grade weapons and could potentially do more harm with what they have available to them were they to choose to attack or move in that direction.
They are much more formidable, many times more than the Hamas, but that's why we are leaving them for a future date, because we will need all that we have in order to deal with them, but we will deal with them one way or the other. There are negotiations now to get them to agree to move their commandos 10 kilometers from the border so that we will be safer. If they fail to agree to that, there will be a big mess, a bloody mess, and it's unavoidable.
Yeah. Well, that's not something we look forward to, but we certainly understand the dilemma and the decision making that goes into that. Our prayer and our hope is that there is success, that some of the leadership of Hamas are found sooner rather than later. I know that everyone's hoping to get news of that might be a real turning point in what we're looking at here, and that people in Israel get to go back to their homes and their lives. I will say also, people in Gaza, I hope that they have a chance to return to something and rebuild something that looks like a home as well. Yeah.
Amen.
And now the Dram. And it's certainly a pleasure that Shlomo in particular and myself have shared a dram of whiskey before. It's something that we share in common. We've both got some scotch in our glass, some single malt. The Glenlivet is your bottle of choice there today. And I know that's not Sharona's drink, so we told her it was okay to bring some wine. But it is almost Shabbat there. It's a little early in the day for me to be drinking, so I have the tiniest of little drams here. And I didn't have any Glenlivet in the house, but I thought that the bottles that I put behind me, I thought I would stick to Speyside, which is the area of the region of Scotland. So I have the Glenallachie, which is one of my favorite. You can see how dark that liquid is, very different in color to what you were holding up.
It's peaty, lots of peat.
No, it is natural color, but the peat does not affect the color so much as the wood, and so it's the sherry barrels that this is sat in. That's what really brings that color in. This is also cast strength, so even more important to have just a tiny dram.
So, yeah, I shared this with you earlier. So Glenlivet is the leading single malt whiskey in America, leading sale. It's also the oldest private distillery in Scotland, founded in 1824. So next year, 200th anniversary of Glenlivet, Rachel. We got to throw a party.
Well, that sounds like a good excuse. That's true. Well, I want to wish you both a good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom, and thank you, and a l'chaim, and just hopes for the well-being and safety of family and friends, and in this difficult time where difficult things have to be done, that peace lies not too far ahead in some form or another.
Amen. And I wish people to focus on the positive as much as you can. There's a equation that shows that 3 positive things can help counteract each negative thing.
Sharona, that's good wisdom, I think, for all of us as we deal with all of the ups and downs of life. But certainly being put to the test in an extreme way over there at the moment. So let me wish you a Shabbat Shalom and one more l'chaim.
Shabbat Shalom, l'chaim, good health.
Well, that brings this special episode of A Dram and a Drash to an end. I want to wish everyone a good new year as we move from 2023 to 2024. I'm looking forward to bringing more episodes to you in the early part of next year. I will be bringing, first of all, Rabbi Grisha Abramowitz, the chief Reform rabbi in Belarus, to come and speak with us. And then we have more episodes to come after that as we explore Yiddish music and dance and also get to meet yet another Jew who happens to work in the whiskey world. So we'll be going back to more normal scheduled topics as we move through 2024. But I hope that you have found this episode an opportunity to hear some helpful information, gain some additional perspectives, and keep the conversation going. So until next time, l'chaim.